This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube on the Palmdale 2045 channel, and it's also being recorded. I'm Simran Malhotra, principal at Ramey & Associates. We are leading the general plan update for the city of Palmdale. Today's meeting is the scoping meeting for the environmental impact report, which accompanies the general plan document. And for that, we have our consultants with us, Rincon consultants who are leading the preparation of the EIR. We have Matt Maddox, principal at Rincon, and Greg Martin, who both will be making the presentation today. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt to kick us off.
Thank you, Simran. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Matt Maddox, as Simran mentioned, principal with Rincon. Rincon is assisting the Ramey team and the city staff to lead the preparation of an environmental impact report. Tonight's meeting is all about the environmental impact report, which is just kicking off. We're at the very beginning stages of that process. We'll run through the steps of that process and the opportunities for public input. There'll be multiple stages, not only tonight, but we also have a notice of preparation scoping period that ends next month. So we'll detail how you can submit written comments if you do not want to submit verbal comments tonight, or in addition to your verbal comments, you have an opportunity for that. What tonight's meeting is really about is to identify and to seek your input and comment on some of the environmental issues that we should be addressing when we are preparing the environmental impact report, which will be done later this year. In addition, we also want to talk about alternatives to the preferred land use alternative, and if there's any variations in those of ways to avoid or reduce environmental impacts. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Greg Martin, who's going to walk through the process, kind of the background, and then at the end, if you can hold your questions and comments. Our presentation is only about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we have the remainder of the time to answer questions and take your verbal comments as we go through. So thank you very much. Greg.
All right, thank you, Matt. Welcome to the scope meeting tonight. I want to share my screen and we'll be giving the presentation. So let me quickly do that. All right, and you should all be seeing the cover slide for the presentation, hopefully here. The general plan update is called Envision Palmdale 2045. And tonight is the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, scoping meeting for the project. Sorry, let me get on to the next slide here. There we go. So what is the purpose of a scoping meeting? It is to inform the community and interested agencies about the proposed project, inform the community about the EIR process, and solicit input regarding the EIR scope, inform the community and interested agencies about future opportunities for input. And as Matt mentioned, we're in the scoping period actually, which means the period during which the public can submit comments on the potential scope of the environmental impact report, things to be included and studied in the environmental impact report. And that began on June 23rd and runs through July 23rd. So that's a 30-day period, about 1 month. The proposed land use map for the proposed project is shown on this slide, and that's basically the project area for this project. Any project has a project area. Sometimes it could be as small as a single parcel or lot, but in this case, since this is a general plan update for the whole community, the plan area or project area is not only the whole city limits of Palmdale, but also encompasses the whole sphere of influence of the city, as shown on this map. The city boundary in light gray, the sphere of influence in as a red line. And then also on this map, the proposed land use designations are shown within different categories: residential designations, mixed use designations, commercial, office and other, industrial, and public, and a few other things such as major roads, highways, waterways, etc. So Palmdale 2045 is a 3+ year comprehensive update to the city's general plan, and which is the guiding document for the future of Palmdale over 25 years, from 2020 to 2045. The general plan serves as the blueprint for future development and conservation of the community. And that's not only true for Palmdale, but for any general plan under California planning law. The following actions will also be taken by the city of Palmdale in connection with the general plan update and are considered part of the proposed project that we will analyze in the EIR. And that is, of course, adoption and implementation of the general plan update itself, but also adoption and implementation of a climate action plan and adoption and implementation of the zoning ordinance amendment, any zoning ordinance amendments necessary to ensure consistency with the general plan update. So for example, if a land use designation of a property or area changes and then it's necessary to change the zoning designation to keep it consistent with the land use designation, then that would be done as well. And this is all done under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. And the purposes of CEQA are to disclose the significant environmental effects of proposed actions to the public and decision makers, identify ways to avoid or reduce environmental effects through mitigation measures or alternatives, enhance the public participation process in the planning and environmental review process. So those are the purposes of CEQA and this whole process. The CEQA review process has already begun for this project with the circulation of the notice of preparation. Minimum period we need to do that for is 30 days, and we are doing that. After that, the city will prepare the draft EIR, including addressing or incorporating areas identified through the scoping process as necessary and appropriate. Then the city will file a notice of completion once the draft EIR is ready. And there will be another public review period for the draft EIR, and that's a 45-day minimum period. After we receive comments on the EIR, we will prepare a final EIR, including responses to comments on the draft EIR. And then the city will prepare findings to take the hearings on the project and then go to those hearings where the city will make a decision on the project. So the notice of preparation, or NOP. An NOP is required by under CEQA to announce that a lead agency is preparing an EIR. So we have prepared an NOP and released that to the public through various means, including project website, posting, etc. The NOP facilitates a scoping process to gather stakeholder input on what potential impacts the EIR should consider. And the public review period for this NOP for this project is from June 23rd to July 23rd of this year, 2021. So issues to be analyzed in the include all the ones shown on this slide. I won't run through every single one, but these are all the issues in the CEQA checklist and the state CEQA guidelines that should be analyzed in an EIR. Everything from aesthetics, air quality, biological and cultural resources. More recently added some areas like energy, greenhouse gas emissions, wildfire, and everything else on this list. Other issues that are addressed in the EIR will include cumulative impacts, that is impacts of other projects, can even be past, present, or future projects, projects outside the plan area. Also potential growth-inducing impacts from the proposed project. And as Matt mentioned, alternatives. An EIR is required to include an analysis of a reasonable range of alternatives under CEQA, including a required no project alternative, meaning what would happen or will be the impacts of not doing the project, not carrying out the project at all. And project alternatives will be determined based on the conclusions reached through the draft EIR, but we can also take comments tonight if people have suggested alternatives or any comments about the alternatives. So our preliminary schedule for this project runs from 2021 to 2022. Notice of preparation, we're currently in that portion, June to July of 2021. We anticipate that the draft EIR will be available for public review in late 2021. And then we'll write responses to comments received on the draft EIR in early 2022 and release the final EIR in early spring of next year, and take the project and the EIR to Planning Commission and then City Council in the spring of next year. So going back to the public scoping period, or the NOP scoping period, the NOP comment period closes on July 23rd. And the NOP and other project information can be viewed on the project website, which is listed there on the screen, www.palmdale2045.org. You can submit comments, should submit comments in writing, and mail or email those comments no later than July 23rd to Megan Tanner, the planning manager for the City of Palmdale, Department of Economic and Community Development, 38250 Sierra Highway, Palmdale, California, 93550. And Megan's email and phone number are also listed on this slide. So thank you. And at this point, we can take any questions or comments, I believe, or I'll hand it back maybe to Matt or another member of the team to have any closing comments.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. One piece of logistics just for the group to know, just a reminder for some of you that joined late. This is the, as part of the Palmdale 2045, this is the EIR scoping meeting. At 6:30, we'll be changing gears slightly and talking about resiliency and climate change as part of the GPAC workshop, public workshop. Again, so we have until 6:30 to inquire from you, the audience, and members of the public, what environmental issue areas are of concern that you would like us to make sure that we address. So Greg, perhaps you could just pull open the slide of the issue areas to be addressed. Go back to the slide that has the issues to be addressed in the EIR. And so what the input that we're looking for to gather tonight and as part of the NOP scoping period, again, which ends July 23rd, is really, are there important issue areas or environmental concerns that you have as the audience, or if you're an agency member, that you want to ensure that we address or that we should know about when we are preparing the environmental impact report, which will be done throughout the rest of this year and going out for public review later at the end of the year. So are there any of these particular issue areas on this list? This is the list that we are required to analyze as part of state law under the California Environmental Quality Act that are particular to Palmdale or to your community or your areas that you are aware of that we should make sure that we spend careful attention to. And then we'll start with that question first, and then later we'll ask a question about alternatives. So does anybody have a comment? And I think the best way to do this is if you could raise your hand on the raise your hand function in Zoom, and then we'll go in order as best we can. I see GPAC Debbie. I see your hand raised.
Hi. Yes, hi. What my issue would be Joshua trees and protection of the Joshua trees. Thank you.
Okay. Basically ensuring that they are not cut down, not removed, not hindered in any way, and from that standpoint. Great. Thank you, Debbie. That will definitely be taken into consideration in terms of where in the environmental document that'll be looked at is actually under the biological resources section. So being a sensitive species, Joshua trees will be evaluated from that perspective. So that is definitely something. We'll make note of that and ensure that Joshua trees have a specific discussion as part of the environmental impact report. Thank you. Anyone else? Any other hands raised or comments? I think it's a small enough group. I don't know. You can just go ahead and speak out. And if we have multiple people talking,
yes. Hello.
We have Cynthia Chambers.
Yes, I'm concerned about the garbage and trash that's along the roadways.
Litter that's currently on the ground specifically?
Yes, everywhere.
Okay. Is there a particular location or throughout the city? Is there any one specific area that is of concern that we should know about?
Throughout Antelope Valley.
Thank you.
it becomes, seems like everybody's, instead of trying to get rid of it through our garbage services, they just throw it out in this in empty fields.
So illegal dumping of trash.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Ron?
Yes, GHG emissions. I don't know what that is. Can you help me understand what GHG emissions are?
Yes, Juan, that is greenhouse gas emissions. That is a required piece that is separate from the air quality element that we are required to evaluate the increase of greenhouse gas emissions associated with the proposed changes that would be administered through this general plan process. So
Okay. So how is the technology developed for measuring greenhouse gases? What are you using? I mean, this is new to me that there's a measurement system here.
sure, there is a model that is standard in the industry and provided from the state that estimates a combination of things. So multiple inputs, including emissions associated with vehicles. So utilizing an estimation of their fuel use and the combustion of that fuel and what that translates into from a chemistry standpoint and the greenhouse gas emissions emitted, as well as from water use, energy use, including both electricity and natural gas, as well as solid waste and in essence landfill emissions that are converted into methane. So there's a model that we utilize called the California Emissions Estimator model. In that program, what we do as part of a general plan is we estimate the net increase of residential units, commercial floor area, other land use types, and then the vehicle trips that are associated. As part of this process, there will be a detailed transportation analysis that will be completed, including an estimate of the net increase or decrease of the transportation vehicle miles traveled as a result of implementation of the plan. So we are able to use that data and then estimate what the increase of, if there is an increase, there could be a decrease of emissions associated with that. And then there are set thresholds that the state has in order to meet its requirements of under Senate Bill 32, which has a target GHG emissions reduction that we've had since 2006 in California. We need to demonstrate that we are on par with meeting that as part of the CEQA analysis that is done.
Well,
And if I can also, sorry, Juan, for interrupting, but very quickly, we'll talk a little bit more about the emissions profile at the 6:30 meeting. So
okay.
you'll get a little bit more information on this topic then, but go ahead.
Correct.
No, I can wait.
Anybody else, Melissa, the hand raise? If not, Greg, can you scroll down to the alternatives?
I'd like to say something about cultural resources.
Please, yes, please.
Yes. During the pandemic, it seems like the whole city shut down. And I understand that because it was a health problem, but they could have done something for people outdoors at social distance with masks. And I have another home near Tucson, Arizona, and they didn't shut down. They just did everything outside. Of course, can't do it in triple digits, but they did everything outside, socially distanced, required masks, had fines if you didn't have a mask. And they had 30 events every month over there, and my house over there. And this house over here, they had nothing. And I even offered to do some things outdoors, but because I'm a teacher, but Palmdale, the city of Palmdale just dropped the ball and did nothing. They had maybe one or two things for little kids. They had a couple of virtual things. I do a lot of virtual things online, and I didn't see the city of Palmdale Parks and Recreation do anything that was helping community. not just kids, but adults too. And all I saw was one event, which was not monitored very well by the sheriff's department. And this is a really disappointing community, because before this pandemic, Parks and Recreation were very involved in this city and doing everything they could. And during 2020, they did nothing. Even though I volunteered.
Can I ask, looking forward, is this a plan that's looking out for the next 25 years? Do you have recommendations from a policy standpoint or from an environmental standpoint that the city can do to perhaps enhance outdoor activities in unique circumstances, health events like we've seen last year? Is there any suggestion on what the city can do?
Yes, I would suggest they look at what Tucson, Arizona did.
Thank you. Any other comments? And we can definitely, I do want to prompt another question. Greg, if you can change it to the alternatives question. For those that have been following the process, which I know many of you are GPAC members and have been active in this process. So we have a draft land use plan, not that has a long time before it's actually adopted. This is the draft version we're moving forward with. Are there proposed alternatives that you would like to see? And what we're looking for is ways that can minimize or avoid environmental impacts from a land use perspective, and ultimately be the vision of Palmdale moving forward that you would like to see analyzed and discussed. So we'll be moving forward with the preferred land use alternative that the city council ultimately gives the blessing as the proposed project within the EIR, but we also have the requirement to analyze a reasonable range of alternatives as well. And what we're really looking to do as part of that is, if there are impacts identified that are significant, can we identify alternatives that would reduce or avoid some of those impacts? And in essence, change the plan ever so slightly in certain instances. For example, if there's a particular land use in a certain location within the community that's causing we talked about Joshua trees, a removal of Joshua trees, and we change a piece of that land use scenario so that those land uses stay the same and those Joshua trees are protected, and thus we avoid a significant impact to the biological resources associated with the Joshua trees. Are there any alternatives that have come to mind, or that you've been thinking about or would like to see considered or reviewed as part of this environmental review?
I see David Nielsen.
One person. Yep.
David, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Is it possible to get a land use plan that is larger? The one that I have right now is on the computer. Is it possible to get a full-size land use plan to be able to answer the question or to make comments on?
David?
Yes, a full-size map.
I'll ask Simran and city staff, is that something that a member could come down to City Hall and view currently, or is it only via electronic at this point in time?
We can definitely provide a hard copy. If you come into City Hall, you can either email the general plan email and let us know when you're going to come in, or you can just come in and just might take a couple minutes to print it out, but we'd be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen.
A PDF copy is also available online where you can zoom in and look at it more closely on the screen. I realize when you're looking at the entire city, it's very hard to read given the size of the city.
It's a little difficult to read it online and to study it.
Of course. Let's see, Teresa.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to mention too, and I said this last time, I'd still love to see safer bike lanes. I know I've talked to several community members who would like to see safer bike lanes. There are like a couple of bike lanes, but they don't really lead to anything, or we have to drive a car to get to them. And so thinking about environmental impact, reducing the amount of cars that are driving, or, reducing the amount of time that I have to drive to a place. So I'd love to see more safer bike lanes, maybe away from where the cars are, or give them more priority. I'd love to see that. And then also the woodland preserve that we have, talking about Joshua trees, rather than maybe replacing, places with grass and lawns, having something like the woodland preserve, which is a really nice place to walk through, something like that as a park, rather than lawns or grasses, which require a lot of water and stuff.
Teresa, on the bike lane question, are there specific locations in the city that you utilize or would like to utilize, or that you would recommend as being areas that should enhance the bike lanes? Are there specific intersections? Yes. And if so, can you give a few just for us to jot those down?
I know that before COVID, there was a couple of cyclists who would meet like every Sunday at the Marie Kerr Park. So anywhere leading from Marie Kerr Park or around the mall area, like I know my kids, they would love to go to the mall. Hey, Mom, can I go to the mall, ride my bike over there? I'm like, no, you're going to get hit by a car. So anywhere like in that area, where we have parks, where we have the mall, places leading from residential areas to those areas. So
thank you.
Maribel?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to echo this same kind of sentiment regarding the bike lanes from the last speaker. I am actually a board member for the High Desert Cycling Group. And I would like to ask if, kind of to answer the question from the presenter, if it would be possible to look at safe zones to schools with those bike lanes. Also, if we could look at protective bike lanes, and those bike lanes, and when I share, I don't have specific locations, but I certainly can bring this up to my board committee with the cycling group at our next meeting, and can come up with something that we can recommend if you would like that. However, I would like to see them connect us to public transportation, because I think it's important, just like the other caller mentioned, to the parks, the mall, things of that. But I'd like to see them connect to the schools, connect to public transportation. That would be kind of my request. And again, if you would like, I could come together with my board members and put something together that we can share with you all in terms of what preferences we may have in terms of some streets, because I know that they've been working on something like that for a very long time and have been requesting some streets versus others. But safety in terms of the speed is a very serious concern, because our streets are traveled at a high speed of rate, and that even if you put like protective bike lanes for us, it kind of, cars fly by. So that's probably one of the reasons, and maybe the heat and cold sometimes too, that kind of prevents folks from becoming cyclists, or the cyclists from going out there and being more active. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. And I would say generally, yes, if you're group that you're affiliated with, the High Desert Cycling Group, that has that interest, and the city staff would love to see that input as part of not only the environmental impact report, but also as taken into consideration as part of the overall plan, as part of the circulation element and the policies that go into that. That's a definite component that we're looking at is those safe routes, number one, safe routes to schools, but also providing adequate amounts of alternative modes of transportation above and beyond just vehicles. So we're looking at public transit as well as bike and pedestrian access. So if you have specific areas that your group has been looking at or would recommend, I think we definitely would want to see that and take that into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Can I say something about what's done in my other location where I have another home? It's the sidewalk is raised from the street, and there's a bike lane and a sidewalk. Then your fast moving cars will not go on the sidewalk, of course, and you'll have a bike lane and a sidewalk on the raised portion. That's what they do over in Arizona.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'll also add at our next, actually not the next, but the one after next, July 28th meeting, we'll be discussing the mobility framework, and we'll be sharing the locations for new bike lanes, and I would encourage you to join that meeting as well and give us additional feedback at that point.
Anyone else have a comment or a question? Well, with that, Greg, maybe you could just put up the slide of the way to submit a written comment. So we'll hang here for a few more minutes in case any questions get sparked or additional people join us. For those that are wanting to drop off, and hopefully you'll rejoin us again at 6:30 when we begin the resiliency discussion. But if you would like or to share with friends or family that also maybe want to comment, again, our public comment period goes through July 23rd. And Greg, go one slide back. And if you would like to submit a written comment, you can submit those at the address on the screen or to the email address that is listed. And we encourage you to check out the Palmdale 2045 website, where all the information for the general plan up to this point, as well as the PowerPoints and access to the previous presentations for all the previous workshops, are available. If you want to get caught up on any of those, please visit that site and stay up to date on those. As new information comes out, we will be posting all the information related to not only the environmental impact report, but all of the policy documents and the general plan elements as they are ready for viewing in the coming months. And again, we look forward for your input and your comments and questions as they come throughout the process. So with that, thank you for this one. We'll hang on for a few minutes. If anybody has an additional question, we'll hang. And then for those that are hoping to join the workshop tonight at 6:30, stay tuned. We'll rejoin that. You can just stay on the line here or rejoin with the same Zoom link at the 6:30 workshop for resilience. And if there's
Maribel, you had your hand.
Please hop in. Sorry, Simran.
Sorry,
yeah.
Maribel had her hand up. I wasn't sure if she still had another question.
No, my question was answered. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, David Nielsen.
Hi, I just want to piggyback on what Ms. Ochoa said about this is a pre-planning. So according to the president, we'll have other pandemics, but it's a good idea to plan. I found myself, my physical health, my endurance and lung capacity, for instance, were greatly diminished during the pandemic. Therefore, having a plan for outdoor activity, social distance, mask, but some kind of exercise would be a very good idea, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, probably keep a lot of people out of the hospital or decrease problems with their lungs. And I just think that's an excellent idea to have some kind of plan in place in that regard.
That's what I was hoping to do, to see from the city of Palmdale, which I didn't see, something, some kind of plan instead of no plan at all in Parks and Recreation, and especially for the teenagers.
Thank you, David, for your comment.
Lourdes?
I hope it works now. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, without the echo, perfect.
Wonderful. I want to go back to, I hope I'm not, I was trying to figure out where to find the hand signal, but okay, I found it. You know, last week we touched upon the San Andreas Fault, and you know that it's quite very active. And looking at the map, most of our southern area in the city of Palmdale, I mean that fault runs across us. So how are we, I mean, based on what we talked about last week, every 130 years, there is a huge earthquake that will impact us. I don't even know where we are at that point, if we're even close to 130 years, but in preparation, as far as the project that we are doing, what are alternatives? Because we know that there is quite movement on the earth.
Sure. So stemming from the safety element discussion you guys had last week or so, that is something that absolutely is addressed: earthquakes, ground shaking forces, and then some of the after effects, liquefaction and other impacts associated with that. Not to mention now what we also look at is the evacuation and possibly emergency access. Yes. After an event like that happens, which is also a major concern. So those are all issues that need to be addressed as part of the safety element update process. And then in the environmental impact analysis, we will also be looking at that in the geology and soils section of the EIR. So specifically related to faults, and definitely the San Andreas fault is something that we have to look at, and whether there are any potential, if we are locating structures in close proximity, that we're increasing the potential hazard to that. And if so, if the plan is ultimately doing that, then we need to identify ways to mitigate that. So one aspect of it is that the safety element in and of itself is already looking at that and needing to come up with policies and implementation measures to address how to avoid that, which number one is either avoiding development or specific certain types of development in those locations in close proximity to the faults. And then second, actually identifying ways to build, if there are ways to build or mitigate what the structural engineering needs to be in those buildings, and having those as requirements for any of those structures that may be located within what we would consider a hazardous zone. So the environmental analysis in the EIR will be addressing anything that is above and beyond what the safety element is addressing, and then suggesting additional policies or measures or requirements that individual projects, if they were to be located within close proximity to a fault, or if they would do certain kinds of development that could put people in harm's way, how do we mitigate that as best we can to reduce that and avoid that impact entirely?
So I'm going to presume that you guys have mapping. There are certain areas that you have located that is subject to liquefaction, things like that. So we should at least know where to build, if in fact we are building or there are actual buildings there, what we need to do to mitigate the hazards.
That's correct. The State Department of Conservation provides maps for all of those hazardous areas that are where they are and where the parameters of those locations are located. Those are built into the safety element and referenced in the safety element, and that we then make some of our land use decisions and land use policy decisions based on trying to avoid the impact areas related to those. And if they are in close proximity, there is a potential risk. We need to come up with ways, both in the general plan and as part of the environmental analysis, to avoid or mitigate that to the level that is possible, to minimize and avoid that risk as much as humanly possible. And what I will say to that effect is the state and federal government, both from a FEMA perspective related to earthquakes and other natural disasters, as well as the state, have substantial requirements, and especially building code requirements when you look to the state building code, that have to factor in earthquake and other seismic related issues to that. So the city needs to, and the city building officials need to administer those laws, but then we can also add specific requirements in Palmdale to to address any additional concerns above and beyond that. And that may be unique to Palmdale and its location along fault lines.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome.
Debbie has another question. Debbie, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. What I'd like to do is kind of follow up on the earthquake conversation that we just had, and I know we had some last week as well. But when we're looking at mitigating factors, I think what I'm concerned about most is our governor's plan for Rancho Vista Boulevard and what he would like to see along Rancho Vista Boulevard and what the city would like to see along Rancho Vista Boulevard. And in light of how close it is to the earthquake fault, it seems that we maybe ought to have that, we ought to have a strong position because from what I understand, the governor is considering up to 7 stories along Rancho Vista Boulevard, and we're right by the San Andreas Fault. So, and I know the city is well aware of that. It's just, I think we need specific language for that specific area, or there's also some areas on the east side of Palmdale where they're pretty close to the faults there as well. So that would be my one comment about that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
I'm not seeing any more raised hands.
Okay. With that in mind, Greg and I will hang on the line for the next 15 minutes or so if there are additional questions. For anybody that's also joining at 6:30, you're more than welcome to take a break and come back and join us shortly. You can either stay online and continue, or if you want to log out and log back in at 6:30, we'll start the next workshop at 6:30. In the meantime, if you still have environmental comments or alternative suggestions, we'll be here.
This is Maribel again.
A couple of raised hands again. Go ahead, Maribel.
Sorry, I just had another thought come to mind as I'm listening to the lady speak. And please let me know if this is not the right forum. But I know that they're talking about like a fast speed rail. Does that have anything to do with this? And I'm sorry that I missed the presentation, so please forgive me for that if the question has already been raised.
I don't know if city staff wants to address. I'm happy. So I think what you're referring to is the California High-Speed Rail Project, which is being administered by the state, which would pass through in Palmdale. There's currently a Bakersfield to Palmdale extension, then Palmdale to Burbank extension. And those are in the pre-planning phases as well. Coincidentally, they're in the process of doing their own environmental impact report and a larger environmental impact statement, because there's also federal approvals that need to go in. So that is part of our consideration. That is not part of the Palmdale 2045 plan in and of itself, and that's not an approval that would come as part of the plan, but it's definitely something that we are needing to look into and make sure that we are planning accordingly. I don't know, Simran or city staff, if you guys have had that come up or want to address that, if I misspoke at all.
No, of course. No, I'll just add on to that. The city adopted a specific plan for the area around the train station where the high-speed rail would stop. There's also a second high-speed rail line which would potentially connect Las Vegas to Southern California, which is anticipated to have a stop here. The location of that station is planned near Sierra Highway between Avenue Q and Palmdale Boulevard, just south of the current multimodal train station where Metrolink also stops. That specific plan takes into account and it had its own environmental documentation prepared for it as well. That takes into account the impacts of that train line coming through Palmdale. And Carlene or Megan, if you'd like to add on to that, feel free to do so.
I would just add that we're actually actively seeking a grant to do some further analysis in regards to some infrastructure timing in regards to this station. So while it might seem like we've planned this station for a long time, we're moving into the next phase, which is really exciting.
Teresa?
Yeah, I just had a question. I know last week there was a lady who was mentioning that there's a group that cleans up on Saturdays, and I'm going to be starting to reach out to them and work with them with the cleanups. I know illegal dumping was brought up, but also waste management. There's a lot of community members who have expressed and their dissatisfaction with waste management. I know that's like our only option out here. Are we looking at keeping waste management? Is waste management going to be changing policies? Are they going to be adding anything like composting or opening up different hours? Do you have any information about waste management?
So I'll go ahead and take that one. We actually have an illegal dumping task force that has been developed at the city recently. There are a lot of different things that the city partners with waste management, as well as various community groups, to prevent, educate, and deter illegal dumping. And we're going to be doing more. So look out for those things. We'll make sure that those notices go out on social media to inform public of how you can provide input and how you can see what is up and coming to those changes. Currently, we have a hauling agreement with Waste Management. It's active, and we are not pursuing an amendment right now. As part of the illegal dumping task force, we are pursuing some changes to that agreement, but they will remain our hauler for the foreseeable future. I'm not certain when that agreement is over, but currently we are under contract with them.
Okay.
Thanks, Colleen. I also see Maribel's hand up again. Did you have another comment?
Yes, I'm so sorry, but thank you for this opportunity. The lady, talking about the waste management, is there another group that is addressing that individually? And not necessarily the task force, but the fees, possibly having more companies. I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes sense here because of the environmental and all the illegal dumping that we see around. Is there another forum that we could go to that can address it, or is this part of this? Is that part of this forum? Because I have suggestions and some ideas regarding that as well.
Sure.
Not just talking about the fees, because as I hear fees are trying to go up.
Oh, I wasn't talking about the fees. But that's definitely a good point. Go ahead and email the general plan email, and I'll connect you with our staff members who are leading the illegal dumping task force, as well as manage the waste management contract. So it would be a great resource. And of course, we'd love to hear from the community. Oftentimes you have better ideas than us. So that would be great and welcome feedback. So yeah, go ahead and reach out and we'll connect you to the right people to make sure that your input is heard.
Okay, thank you so much.
See another hand. Cynthia, would you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Do you have an Adopt a Highway or street program?
For litter.
Yes, for littering.
City said the highway program will actually be through Caltrans, correct, Carlene, rather than through the city. And does the city have anything local to that effect on any city streets, Carlene?
I'm not sure on the city street side, but we can definitely make that information available. But like Matt said, on the highway side, that would all be through Caltrans. Palmdale Boulevard and State Route 138 are both Caltrans facilities, as well as State Route 14. So those are through the state. And I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm Carlene Saxton, the Director of Economic and Community Development here at the city, for those of you who don't know me.
Whose jurisdiction does Sierra Highway fall under?
It's a city.
Teresa, did you have another comment? Your hand's still up. I wasn't sure if it was up from earlier.
It was from earlier, but I did want to ask about, I know I went to some of the community partners meetings for Palmdale, and they mentioned waste management starting a compost program. Is that still happening? Do you know?
Carlene?
I'm not aware of the ins and outs of our waste management hauling agreement. I wish we had our hauler agreement person on the line. Unfortunately, we didn't realize that we're going to have so many waste management questions, but we'll make sure to, for those of you who have registered, we can kind of put together a little list and provide you the correct staff members to get you answers to these really great questions.
I don't see any additional hands raised. As Matt said, we'll hang out for another few minutes, or our next meeting starts at 6:30.
For those that sat through with us for the SCOBY meeting, thank you very much. We really appreciate your comments and questions and areas that we should look at for the environmental impact report. Just as a follow-up reminder, we have a scoping period. If you have additional comments that you want to make, or think of something in the next couple of days as this stuff marinates in your brain for the next couple of days, or following the next session that starts at 6:30, please follow the directions on this slide to submit comments in written form. Happy to take those all the way until July 23rd, at which point then we'll be ramping up our next process for the next 4 or 5 months, which is actually doing the environmental impact analysis. And then we'll have a follow-up public input for our environmental impact report at that stage once it goes out for public review towards the end of the year, likely in late November or December. And that will begin another follow-up 45-day public review period at that point in time. So we appreciate your comments tonight and look forward to future opportunities to get your input.
I really hate to do this, but is it okay to ask another question?
Please. We've got 4 minutes. We've got plenty of time.
You just prompted another question here for me. So with development and this huge general plan and all these changes that seem to be a wonderful thing for Palmdale, the anticipation that we'll have more people here. Are we considering, as far as the environment and that impact of more trash?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is actually addressed in the utility section. So one major consideration that we need to look at is how much the capacity of the existing landfills and the ability to pick up the trash, and whether we are going to exceed that capacity with the additional growth that may be anticipated from the funds. That is absolutely something that's addressed in the environmental impact report.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to say something about that as well. It seems like it would be a great idea for the city of Palmdale to have some type of incentive to have people recycle and reuse rather than like I know the next door social media that we have here in Palmdale. They have free things that they offer that people can pick up rather than throwing it in an empty field. Shouldn't the city have something that would be more an incentive besides just next door, having that an incentive to recycle or reuse?
We do have those programs with waste management. Probably the easiest one to identify that we currently have is for mattresses. I know that's a often dumped illegally item, and there is an incentive program that we partner with Waste Management on. There's actually cash dollars involved. And then there's future programs that we're considering as part of the illegal dumping task force that can be implemented, but great feedback, and we'll continue to utilize that going forward with that group.
Okay, well, I do know that there's, because my father was part Native American, I do know that they're concerned about the environment. Our tribe is, which is not in this state, but there's a lot of us in this state, Choctaws. And they, the powwow.com has an incentive program that gives rewards for people to recycle and reuse. If you'd like to know more about that, I could let you know what that is. But I don't know if the city of Palmdale would be interested in doing something like that. That would be a good way to get schools and kids involved in doing that.
Great, thank you. Yes, any information like that is very welcome. You can either email the general plan email to let us know, and we'll get you in contact with the right people. But that feedback is very welcome, and we're always open to creative ideas to these complex situations.
Thank you.
Debbie,
Yeah, I just wanted to, based on the last comment, I just wanted to make a quick plug for the waste management app. While everything does get posted on Nextdoor, and I do see it on Nextdoor, the waste management app is great because it lists all the special recycling days. It'll even give me a reminder to put my trash out. So it's a really handy thing for people that want to recycle more than what, you know, because it gives you all of the things that you can recycle, as I said, the special days and all of that. I found it to be really handy. So for people interested in recycling, the waste management app is actually really great. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, I think we have time for a couple of more comments. Cynthia, go ahead, and then Maribel.
I didn't have anything in addition to that.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we don't
Can I
see
go
any
now?
other hands up.
Can I go now?
Please.
Okay. Hi, this is Maribel again. I'm sorry. So in looking also again in the environment piece of this, and when ladies talk about the recycling, are we considering maybe like in public spaces, and also like one of the ladies mentioned schools, maybe like a kind of a recycling program? I know in Canada, they have around the city, there's like 3, I forgot what they are, but one is like for the trash, one is for the compost, and one is, I forget, something else. And so there's 3 options there. So like they had it like this, like a food mart. And once you were done eating, you could separate them, and that would be kind of helpful there. So I'm wondering at, you know, kind of helping the environment and considering putting some of those around in the public spaces, including the school, so we can kind of start bringing that awareness to our younger generations of the recycling and taking care of our, you know, environment and our planet. Just that. And then I was wondering, I don't know if you ladies or gentlemen would know, but I know that there is a recycling fee that is paid or provided as a refund or something back with the mattresses. If someone knows what I'm talking about, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about that. But I was wondering, where's that money going? You know, where is it being allocated for those mattresses that are being properly disposed of?
That's a good question, and I actually don't have the answer to that. And I don't know if the city staff are here.
We actually,
I see someone jump on.
Right. So Ben Lucha, who is oversees our waste management contract and is the leader behind our illegal dumping task force is now on. And so I'm just going to have him talk very briefly because I know we need to move into our GPAC meeting and our workshop. So thank you, Ben, and just give a quick summary and then we'll provide Ben's information to the group if you have any additional questions.
Right. So sorry, I missed the first part of your question, but in terms of the second one with the mattress recycling, yes, we have an agreement with the Mattress Recycling Council to have the city's mattresses recycled. Really, that is just slightly offsets the cost to the city. I mean, it's not a small fraction of what it's costing the city to address it, but we're using that to actually pick up illegally dumped mattresses throughout the city to have them recycled. Other locations do, I believe the AV landfill has a drop-off location for mattresses where people can take in their mattresses and have them recycled free of charge. The fee that they receive is very nominal, so it's more costly for them to actually turn that around and give that money to residents versus just managing the program. I know we're looking at it too, and we're trying to see if maybe we can also do a reimbursement program for mattresses, but that's in our early planning stages, and I really can't give any, it's so early, I really can't outline how it's going to work or how much we're going to be giving to residents, et cetera, but it is something in the works at this moment.
Thank you, Ben. With that, I'll thank everyone who joined us today to give us comments for the scoping portion of the EIR. And I encourage you all to stay on for the next part of the meeting, which is discussing the policy framework for resilience, sustainability, and climate change. We'll give folks a couple of more minutes to either drop off or additional folks who are joining, and then we'll get started. We'll have a couple of folks coming in. All right, in the interest of time, let's get going. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Again, as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and it's being live streamed on YouTube on the Palmdale 2045 channel. As for those who are joining us for the first time, I'm Simran Malhotra, Principal at Ghg Associates. We are leading the general plan update for the city of Palmdale. This meeting is a joint general plan advisory committee and public meeting. And we'll go over ground rules in just a minute. So I'll call the meeting to order at 6:37 p.m. And then briefly, the agenda for today is to provide an update on where we are with the general plan and then continue our discussion on goals and policies for various topics. The topic for today is resilience, sustainability, and climate change. And I know this topic came up in the scoping meeting earlier, and there'll be more opportunity now to ask additional questions and get more information on this topic, which I know is something we haven't discussed a lot previously in these meetings. Let's start with introductions. Starting with city staff, we have Carleen Saxton, who is the Director of Economic and Community Development for the City of Palmdale, And Carlene, I know you'd like to make some welcoming remarks. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Simran. You know me so well. Welcome, everyone. To those of you who just joined, thank you for joining. And for those of you who've been on since 5:30, thank you for your commitment to this process and this project. GPAC, always great to see you. Thank you so much. We also have from the city side, Megan Taggart, our planning manager, Ben Fiss, our senior planner, Ben Lucha, who's our environmental resources manager, and then the consultant team. So we might have some other staff members here and there, but those are the ones who are officially on tonight. So thank you so much, and we look forward to a wonderful discussion as always.
Thanks, Carlene. I'd also like to introduce other folks from the RAMI team. We have Walker Wells, who's the principal at RAMI and leads our sustainability and resilience practice, and also Sammy Taylor, who's a senior planner with RAMI. You're meeting them both for the first time. And of course, you all know Melissa Johnson well. She's also a senior planner at RAMI. Let's go through roll call for the GPAC members. I believe Tony is not able to join today. Juan Blanco.
Here.
Lourdes Everett. Thanks, Lourdes. Colby
I'm
Everett.
here.
Laura Gordon.
Here.
Teresa Ambro.
Good evening.
Matt Harris, I believe, is not able to attend. Aurora Hernandez. I saw her earlier, but she's not on right now. Pat Hunt.
Living the dream.
Welcome. Sherry Kanakira.
Here.
Terry Lamping.
Hi, everybody.
Debbie Rutkowski-Hines.
Here.
And Jason Zink. Don't hear him or see him yet. All right. Now Melissa will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Melissa.
Thanks, Simran. If you could all please stand and place your right hand over your heart and begin after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and you may be seated.
Thank you, Melissa. And the first item on our agenda is meeting minutes approval from our last meeting a couple of weeks ago. Are there any comments?
I didn't get mine with my packet.
Oh. I'm sorry about that. Lourdes will make. Did anybody else have that issue? Doesn't seem like it, but what would you like to do? We can send these out again and then take action on these next time. Any thoughts from the GPAC members?
I didn't see anything that was out of line or missing or anything on mine, but I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second it. I trust them.
Thank you, Lourdes. Melissa, do you want to open the poll?
Yeah, we're going to launch our first poll for this evening. And please remember, this is just for our GPAC members. We're asking if you vote to approve the GPAC 12 minutes. Your options are approve, deny, or abstain. 7 members. In the poll, there we go. All of our GPAC members have voted, so we'll end and share the results with everyone. We have 7 members approving and 1 abstaining. All right, and if you're still seeing this screen, you can click the X in the upper right-hand corner, and when we do polls throughout the evening, you'll be able to see them pop up on your screen. Thanks, everyone.
Well, let's keep moving and let's get started on the rest of the presentation. We also wanted to acknowledge Council Member Juan Carrillo, who just joined. Welcome, Council Member.
Thank you, Simran. Thank you. I had a little bit of trouble coming back to the meeting, but thank you.
Yes, welcome. So we'll get started on the presentation, and we'll be stopping several times for questions and answers. At those points, I request that members keep their questions or comments short so that everyone has the opportunity to share. We'll also have several questions for you all that we'll ask through the poll feature as we just did. And those poll questions will be open for all attendees, not just the GPAC members. Let's start with a couple of poll questions. The first, Melissa, kind of our icebreaker question.
Yes. Pull up. All right, everyone, we're launching our second poll for the evening. This includes 2 questions. It's open to everyone. The first question is, how many general plan related meetings have you attended? The options are, this is my first meeting, 2 to 4 meetings, 5 or more meetings, or I'm a GPAC member, more than 5 meetings. After you've answered that question, you can scroll down on the screen and you'll see a second question, which asks, how did you hear about this meeting? Select all that apply. The Palmdale 2045 website, YouTube channel, the Palmdale magazine, a direct email. You heard about it from the last GPAC meeting on June 17th. I am a GPAC member, or other. Once majority of folks have responded, we'll share the results so everyone can see. Okay, going to end the poll and share the results. So in response to the first question, 50% have attended 2 to 4 meetings. 43% are GPAC members, and 7% is attending their first meeting tonight. In terms of how they heard about this meeting, 36% are GPAC members. The other 36% heard from direct email. 21% found out from the website. 14% found out from Palmdale magazine. And then 7% are from the last meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Something we skipped a little bit. So for those who are joining for the first time or are watching on YouTube, to briefly describe what a general plan is. And all cities are required by the state of California to prepare a general plan. And a general plan is the governing plan that provides overall direction for the future of a city. It's based on the community's long-term vision and its values and priorities for its future. It also establishes land use direction and overall controls on development, which is then implemented through zoning. General plans have goals, policies, and implementing actions that provide direction to city staff, city commissions, and the city council in their decision making. This general plan update is building on what was contained in the 1993 general plan, keeping what's relevant, revising or modifying as needed. As you all are well aware, since 1993, there have been many changes, many changes to regulations, the physical and economic landscape in Palmdale, the state, indeed even the county and the world. And as such, this update is addressing and responding to those changes. The state, through the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, issues technical guidelines that tell cities what they must address in their general plans. There are 9 topics that cities are required to address. These include, as you might expect, land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, noise, safety, air quality, and environmental justice. In addition, cities can choose to address other topics that are important and relevant to them. For example, here in Palmdale, because of Plant 42's presence, the general plan will have a chapter discussing synergies with military facilities. Another important topic is how to create communities that are healthy, resilient, and equitable. We are also required to address new legislation that has been put in place since the last update that needs to be addressed. In today's meeting, we are addressing the requirements for and goals and policies for resilience, climate change, and sustainability. Over the last 2.5 years, we have worked with the community and the General Plan Advisory Committee to develop a vision and guiding principles, created land use alternatives, selected a preferred plan, and we are now developing the content for the general plan document through its goals and policies. We have a series of meetings for various topics starting earlier this month. This is the second of 6 meetings. And as I noted, today's topic is sustainability, resilience, and climate change. During this 2.5-year process, we've hosted many community meetings, pop-up events, both in person as well as virtual during the pandemic, focus groups, surveys, workshops with the Planning Commission and City Council, and as I noted, several online surveys. Based on what we heard from the community and with direction from decision makers, the general plan team prepared vision themes, and these themes and the accompanying guiding principles directed the development of the alternative, as well as the selection of the preferred alternative. And these themes will also guide the goals and policies in the general plan. So today we are continuing our discussion on policy frameworks. As I noted earlier, we're beginning to write the general plan document, and there are certain topics that the general plan must address. The policy frameworks are an interim step to get feedback from the GPAC and the community. And for each of these topics, we have completed our technical analysis and received feedback from the community through all the engagement I had mentioned earlier. And now we'd like to review and solicit additional input on key outcomes, goals, policies, and measures related to each of these topics. And today's topic is resilience, sustainability, and climate change. With that, I'll pause for any questions. And if not, I will turn it over to Sammy Taylor to lead the next part of the presentation.
Hi everyone, thanks Simran. So before we dive into kind of the background information about sustainability and climate and resilience in Palmdale, I wanted to start with a quick poll, and this is still kind of along our icebreaker poll level. So I'm going to launch it now, and it's about everyone's knowledge of climate change. So you should be able to see it. And we're asking, how would you describe your knowledge about climate change? I've heard of climate change, but don't know much about it. I feel somewhat informed about climate change issues. I feel very informed about climate change issues, or I am an expert in the field. I'll give it just a few more seconds here. Okay, I think that's probably about everyone. I'll share these results. So it looks like we have a pretty good mix of folks with some background information here on the call, which is great. Hopefully everyone will be able to get something out of this presentation then. With 53%, most of the respondents feel that they have somewhat are informed about climate change issues. So hopefully you'll be able to learn a bit more about that tonight. And then we have a couple, 33%, who feel very informed about climate change. So we're excited to get some of your opinions on that. And for people who don't know much about it, hopefully this will be a great kind of introductory level presentation for climate change in Palmdale. So thank you so much, and let's just dive right in. Okay, so next slide, please. So what is sustainability? Sustainability is the ability to meet the needs of the present without preventing future generations from meeting their own needs. This definition is from the UN Brundtland Commission, which was active during the 1980s, but really to this day captures the intent and spirit of sustainability. So true sustainability is the intersection of these three topics here in this Venn diagram. We have people, planet, and profit, and all three of these things affect each other. And the importance of practicing sustainability is becoming even greater as the potential impacts of climate change, which is really only an aspect of environmental sustainability, begins to affect all three of these components now and also in the future. Next slide, please. You can see here that there are many different ways of achieving sustainability. There are many different outcomes that we call sustainable, and there are lots of different methods to achieve those outcomes and become sustainable. So this chart shows that there are, many of these different ways and different ways you can achieve them. But you can also see that in order to have, improved water quality, for example, protecting habitat and ecosystem functions like natural filtration processes is important, as well as managing and cleaning our stormwater through low impact development. So there's this intersection between the natural environment and the built environment. And that's something to keep in mind as we kind of move forward. Next slide, please. So this chart here shows that cities can take different actions related to sustainability and climate change based on what they have control over. So cities have direct control over their municipal operations and rights of way, and this is really where they can have the biggest impacts. And they can play more of a supportive role or an influential role at the regional and state levels. Next slide, please. And so here, let's go through this slide, and then we have another poll. So just a little bit more background. So climate change is the one aspect of sustainability that I mentioned, and it is the disruption of historic or normal climate patterns, and it's caused by increased greenhouse gas emissions like carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, that trap heat in the atmosphere and cause the temperature to warm. So this is important because California and Palmdale are already experiencing the effects of climate change, both gradual climate change like warmer daily high temperatures and climate hazard events like extreme heat days like we've seen the past couple of weeks, extreme wind events, different storm patterns, things like that, which expose people, infrastructure, buildings, and ecosystems to a wide range of stress-inducing and hazardous situations. There are also many health impacts of climate change, particularly in elderly and vulnerable populations. So as a result, California has adopted climate policies to really help reduce emissions and adapt to these changes. So I want to go here to our second poll of this part of the presentation. Let me see if I can launch this one. And we're going to ask you about climate-related issues. So the question is, which of the following climate-related issues is of most importance to you? So there are several listed here, but we have renewable energy, water conservation, recycling and composting, biking and walking, public transit, electrification of buildings, electric vehicles, urban forest and green space, all of the above or none of the above. So go ahead and answer that one. just another second. All right, I think we have most everyone responding. So some pretty good variation. The leader response with 46% was all of the above. I guess water conservation with 31% came in second, followed by, we have a four-way tie, three-way tie with public transit, urban forest and green space, and none of the above. So hopefully we can dive a little bit more into those issues later. Thank you, everyone. All right, so next slide. Okay, so this is a pretty jam-packed slide here, but what we're trying to show is that the state has adopted these emission reduction targets and set really a framework for climate action at the state level, which is trickling down to the local levels, regional levels as well. So the state has adopted emission reduction targets. AB 32 set the 2020 target. You can see these on the graph to the right, which has been achieved. SB 32 set the goal of a 40% reduction by 2030 and an 80% reduction by 2050. So these SB 32 has been formally adopted and is law, but former Governor Jerry Brown put forth Executive Order B 5518 in 2018, which calls for the state to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. So this takes it, to close that little gap there at the bottom and also moves the date sooner. So although this is not officially law, this is the direction that the state is moving and most likely will become law and is what we see most cities adopting as their local greenhouse gas reduction target. So in order to help achieve these reductions, the state has adopted several climate policies. You can see, some of the landmark ones listed here, and they're related to carbon-free electricity, emission standards for vehicles, organics diversion, and to help people prepare to adapt to climate hazards. So next slide, please. So in addition to climate policies in general, the state has also adopted several environmental policies that not only help reduce emissions and conserve resources, but help protect ecosystems and help preserve quality of life, enhance quality of life, and make our communities more sustainable. So most of these policies, and this is just a snapshot here of some of the most impactful ones on the screen, relate to the built environment and transportation, which are the state's and most often local communities' largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So CalGreen, or California's Green Building Code, is updated every 3 years to make new construction more efficient, both water, energy, and also has requirements for building materials and other kind of green building measures built in. AB 341 and SB 1383, which was on the previous slide, require waste diversion from landfills. And WELO and SB 606 and AB 1668 address outdoor and indoor water use. And the newest policy is Governor Newsom's executive order that will require 100% of vehicle sales in California to be zero emission vehicles by the year 2035. Next slide, please. So before we move on to look more locally at Palmdale's own emissions, we have another poll. So let me pull that one up for everyone.
Sammy, I'm sure there are some questions that folks might have, so we can stop for a moment for that. Any questions, please raise your hands. Go ahead and launch the poll. I don't see any hands raised.
And yeah, always, I guess feel free to also use the chat for questions. Are we doing that, Simran?
Folks can chat the host with any questions too, and we can read them out.
Okay, so let's launch this poll here. Okay, so this poll asks you about climate change impacts and how concerned you might be. So question 1, how concerned are you about possible impacts of climate change in Palmdale? Please tell us whether you are very concerned, somewhat concerned, not too concerned, or not at all concerned about the following issues. So the first one is worsening heat waves. Second one is worsening drought and water shortages. Third issue is worsening air quality. And the fourth issue is wildfire. Take a second to look through those. Looks like almost everyone answered. I'm going to go ahead and close this in another second. Here are our results. All right, so in terms of heat waves, 60% of respondents, all of you are very concerned, 20% are somewhat concerned, and 7% of you are not at all concerned. In terms of worsening drought and water shortages, 80% of you are concerned, very concerned, and 20% are somewhat concerned. No one is not too concerned or not at all concerned about that topic. Worsening air quality, 47% were very concerned, 40% are somewhat concerned, and we have a tie 7% at not too concerned and not at all concerned. And then worsening wildfires, 53% of you are very concerned and 47% of you are somewhat concerned. So I think it's interesting to note here that there is, worsening drought was kind of our top priority issue, followed by, it looks like, wildfire. And those two, as we all know, are connected. So something to keep in mind as we move forward, and as Walker, again, will go into our policy framework with some policies that can help alleviate some of these issues, hopefully. So thank you all for participating in that one. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think we can move on to...
Actually, there is, Tammy, sorry, I see a hand raised. Teresa, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, on one of the slides, it says that for AB 341, 75% of solid waste must be diverted from landfill by 2020. Since it's already 2021, did we meet that goal, or have we made progress on that goal?
Yeah, so that's a state level goal. I'll have to look and see what the final numbers are. But I do know that the next kind of iteration of that goal is SB 1383, and that focuses primarily on organics diversion, so food waste, yard waste, green waste, and those are important to now focus on since they generate methane in landfills, and methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide actually is. So that's kind of how the state is transitioning to transitioning its waste focus to deal with that issue.
And
but we can definitely check on
with the stats. And then with the compost, I know I had brought that up earlier, if waste management is going to be doing composting. And it doesn't seem like there's a plan yet. Do you know if there's a plan? Are they doing it for households? Are they only doing it for businesses? Do they already have something for businesses that's working?
And Sammy, I think there may be some city staff here.
Yeah,
running those. Yeah.
Ben Luca, would you like to answer?
Sure. Yes, right now we do have an organics program for commercial. We haven't quite rolled it out for residential just yet. Looks like we may have to do it. It is pretty expensive to do it, and we're trying to find ways to address it. And we're working with waste management and other parties to see how our organics can be handled, since there is not an overabundance of composting locations, and but there are more and more waste to energy and other types of facilities coming up, and so we're trying to find what would be the best way to address our organic waste.
Thank you, Ben. Cynthia, did you have a question?
Yes, I had a question, but for that, answer, why doesn't Palmdale talk to some of the landscaping people or the gardening people that are near Palmdale that sell plants for people's yards and plants for their gardens, and just bring it over there and offer free composting to if they buy something there, because gardeners would really love that. But the question I had was not about that. The question I had was, can Palmdale do anything about single-use plastics, including maybe possibly charging a special tax for people that constantly use single-use plastics? Is that possible? Or can that only be done on a county or state level?
Cynthia, that's a good question. I'd suggest you hold that thought till we get into some of the policies that are being proposed, and then we can talk about that a little bit more at that point. Okay, Sammy, you want to continue?
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so Palmdale completed its first greenhouse gas inventory for the year 2005 and found this breakdown of emissions, and it tells us where emissions are coming from within the city. These are community-wide greenhouse gas inventories, so they take a look at emissions that are generated within the city. So you can see here that transportation accounted for 41% of emissions, which looks like the largest individual sector. But when we look at total energy use, so residential and non-residential energy combined, it accounted for 47% of energy use in 2005. So tracking greenhouse gas emissions is important because it allows the city to set a baseline, see changes in its emission profile over time, and identify reductions needed to align with the statewide targets that we've just been talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, so in Palmdale conducted its most recent inventory for calendar year 2017, and you can see the profile is still following the same trends as in 2005. Transportation is the largest contributor and now accounts for 58% of community emissions. Residential and non-residential energy account for 36% of emissions. However, we do know that for year 2017, that emissions from non-residential energy are likely underestimated because we were unable to obtain some data as a result of privacy and data aggregation rules. So we can really assume that this pie is actually a little bit larger and that the non-residential slice is also a little bit larger. Next slide. So in addition to doing the inventory, we put together a forecast based on the preferred general plan land use alternative to estimate what emissions will be in 2045. You can see that the city is projected to grow. We have the demographics projections up on top there. But emissions, you can see in the big green box, are actually expected to decrease 13% from our 2005 baseline year. And this is a result of the state climate action policies that I showed before that are impacting your local emissions. So you can see that although they're going down 13%, additional local action is needed to meet the state emissions reduction target. Next slide. So the main takeaways from the greenhouse gas inventory, and this is what kind of informs our technical analysis of a lot of our climate change measures and policies, is that in 2017, total greenhouse gas emissions increased 9% from 2005, but decreased 6% per service population. So looking at the per service population number helps us account for growing communities. Service population is the number of jobs and residents combined. So we can see that although Palmdale is growing, its emissions are totally increasing, but per capita, per service population, they're decreasing. We know transportation is the majority of our community emissions, followed by energy use. And we know that both of these things are actually connected to land use, which is a great synergy between doing these sustainability policy frameworks and incorporating them into general plans to help inform some of those land use decisions. And we know that emissions are also projected to decrease by 2045 due to the state policies, but that we need local action, additional local action to meet those SB 32 targets of 40% reduction by 2030 or an 80% reduction by 2050. So next slide, and I think that's it for me. I think we'll pause again here for any questions about the inventory or any of the policies we've talked about so far, the state framework.
Okay, well, you'll have Mrs. Walker with Ramey Associates. We'll have a chance to talk about some of these issues with the inventory, kind of the sources of emissions, but also the kind of things that can be done to reduce those emissions in a little bit and talk about the policy frameworks. This next section is just a little bit of an overview of existing plans and programs, some of which we've talked about already around recycling, but it's good to just set a baseline. So we can go to the next slide. Well, this here on the right is a list of the things that Palmdale is already doing. You can see some of the images about electric vehicle charging, community gardens, energy action plan. So in 2011, Palmdale created an energy action plan, and that's serving really as sort of our foundation for looking more deeply at these issues of climate impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, and really climate action planning. The city has installed a number of public EV chargers to support the transition to electric vehicles. There is a community garden program. The city adopted the state's model water efficiency landscape ordinance in 2015, which set more stringent water efficient requirements for landscapes for outdoor water use. There's a native desert plant preservation ordinance, complete street effort on Avenue Q, which is really focused on creating places that are more walkable and bikeable, because those are low carbon or effectively zero carbon modes of transportation as compared to driving. And then the SAVES program to recover edible food. So we talked about the organics diversion from the landfill, where you start by taking food that is still okay to be eaten and finding people who would benefit from that food. So you hope it never ends up in the trash in the first place. And then if things do end up in the trash, that they're separated and taken to a place where they could be composted or biodigested and delivered from the landfill. So here's a list of what we've identified and heard about through the outreach that's already going on. And really the opportunity here is to build on these programs and expand the city's engagement in sustainability. Next slide. We've heard some feedback prior to tonight in the various community engagement efforts about this topic of sustainability and resilience. So, a statement that the general plan should envision an eco-friendly future. That should be sort of included in these overall goals, vision statements, priority topics. It's important to acknowledge the unique landscape that you're located in, the desert landscape, the habitat areas, as well as the open space. And a lot of people don't get the desert. They feel like it's barren, it's dry, there's no nature there. Totally false. Desert landscapes can be some of the most diverse, but also the most adaptive because there's so much struggle. So, the plants and animals have to be really smart about managing water and providing shade and, being quite resilient. So there's a lot that we can learn. Naturally, people would like to reduce pollution, whether it's air pollution, water pollution, pollution in soils, improve transportation options, and provide more trees and shade. I think generally, trees are beautiful. They enhance the aesthetic quality of a community, but in a place that does experience high heat, shade is at a premium. So this is what we've heard so far. Go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it back to Simran to talk about how these policy frameworks are organized and kind of the structure that we're operating in for this next chunk of the presentation about the sustainability and resilience policy frameworks.
Thanks, Walker. Now that we have established the context for these goals and policies on this topic, I'll briefly describe in more detail what the framework itself is. The framework is actually available on the Palmdale 2045 website for those who are in the audience here to download and review in greater detail. The presentation here summarizes that document. So after this meeting, if you haven't already, please review the document and give us some additional feedback if you have more to offer. These are our initial ideas for policy direction, and they don't include all the goals, policies, or measures that the final general plan will cover. They articulate the direction for policy and with additional policies and measures that will be included in the full public draft general plan. And these aren't an exhaustive list, but those we want your feedback on. And if so, if you don't see something that you think should be included and is important to you, please let us know during the discussion portion of our meeting. One of the goals for the general plan document will be to support ongoing assessment of implementation. And in order to do so, we are proposing clear outcomes that are tied to performance metrics. These are both numeric and qualitative and are intended to serve as indicators of success. These metrics and the associated targets can then be used to track progress. And the goals establish the desired result, and the policies are intended to provide direction on how to achieve those goals. And as Walker walks through the various goals and policies, you'll see that format and structure through each of those slides. And with that, I will turn it back to Walker to talk to the next portion of the presentation.
Okay. Before that, just again, ask if there's any questions about the way the policy frameworks work and the general organization structure. Okay, so moving along. There's a couple of different ways to think about how sustainability can find its way into a general plan. So one approach is to make a freestanding sustainability element. Sometimes that includes a climate action plan. I'm certainly doing the climate-related work for the city of Palmdale. And so that may be the approach that gets taken as an element that looks specifically at these ideas. That's good. It doesn't mean that the other approach, which is integrating sustainability into the general plan, isn't viable. So I think what we're really trying to do is to do both and say, how does sustainability find its way into topics like land use, housing, safety, circulation, open space, conservation, noise, and environmental justice. These are the elements that are required, through the state legislation. And if you then look over on the left, you can see a number of these sustainability topics that Sammy has touched on about energy, greenhouse gas emissions, transportation, how that relates to land use, and emissions related to transportation, water, how we protect natural systems, how we manage materials and resources, including recycling. And then ideally, how doing things across those topics is supportive of creating and improving quality of life in the city. And put this chart together to just show that there are a lot of opportunities to integrate sustainability across land use. There are some on housing, the quality of housing, its energy efficiency. We're seeing a number of issues related to safety, particularly in the resilience topic about heat, wildfires, port quality. Circulation, saving energy, reducing VMT, avoiding congestion. And up to acknowledging that there are the social issues Sammy touched on in that Venn diagram, environment, economy, equity. There's an environmental sort of issue that can cut across, pretty much all of these topics. Who has access to predictable energy, who has access to healthy water, who has access to transportation options. And so really what the intent here is to, we're going to go through in a second, is to look at the specific policy measures around the sustainability topics, but also to keep an eye towards how those topics may be reflected in the other elements of the general plan that you've been talking about prior to this meeting. And we can go to the next. So here's our goals or sort of outcome areas. And the ones in dark green we're focusing on tonight, and the ones that are in light green we're not spending as much time on because you have or have had other GPAC meetings that have focused on those topics specifically. So there's kind of a beginning and the end of this. So, understanding that there's value in, or really necessity to think about leadership in your region on these topics. And then there's a number of topical things in the middle, and then the one at the bottom in the middle that you see there is awareness of environment, past and present, which is having a sense of place, a connectedness to the environment, to the ecosystem that your city is located in, both how it has been historically, but what that may look like going forward. So those are some sort of social, maybe more qualitative aspects. And then the other topics we're going to touch on are green buildings or energy efficiency buildings, energy efficient buildings, energy, whether it's fossil fuel free, renewable, quite a bit about waste and waste diversion already, the water supply, and then looking at issues of resilience generally from hazards, but acknowledging that climate change is arguably enhancing a lot of the threats related to heat or fire, poor air quality, water insecurity. And so we really need to be thinking about preparing for and adapting to a changing climate. So I'm just going to walk through each of these. If you have comments or questions or something to add, just raise your hand and we can take it as we go through each of them. I don't need to run through everything and take a break. I'd much rather have a dialogue. We're going to start on this right after this slide. So on this one, we just came up with some initial performance metrics. How might we measure this thing called sustainability? So Sammy talked about the state guidance on carbon neutrality. So the executive order of carbon neutral by 2045. There's a leadership opportunity for the city to adopt what is just an executive order, but to adopt that as a local policy or as your greenhouse gas threshold, for your climate action plan. You can have metrics about reducing energy use and reducing water use in buildings, either as freestanding topics or through the use of green rating systems like the LEED rating system or Green Point rated. In transportation, there's moving people out of cars, and then there's also supporting the adoption of electric vehicles, increasing waste diversion, and then on resilience, identifying ways that we can make communities, facilities, places that people could go to when they need to be at a cooling center or they need to have a place with clean air, or if the electricity grid goes down, that they could go someplace and have access to electricity. And there's sort of a growing body of work around this topic of a resilience hub, a neighborhood facility that provides those basic services to keep the community safe. Next slide. Okay, so here's our first topic on the policy framework. So green buildings, which can touch on a number of environmental issues, and also decarbonized, which really means moving away from fossil-based fuels like natural gas, but also like electricity that's generated using fossil fuels. And looking at strategies to do that for both new construction, which would be sort of all electric design, or major renovations, which might mean removing natural gas appliances. So state requirements include the Cal Green Building Code, a requirement that big buildings, 50,000 square feet or more, report their energy use annually to the state. And then the state has, required that cities adopt streamlining permitting processes for residential solar installations. So that's already in place. The things we've been sort of proposing and that other cities have done are to adopt a local code called a REACH code, requiring all electric design for new construction, and to phase in this transition to all electric for existing buildings. Another possible policy is to require photovoltaic panel installation with battery storage on new construction. Establish a streamlined approval process for battery storage, because this is becoming increasingly common. And then to establish an energy and water efficiency upgrade program for existing buildings. And we've been involved in a number of these at Ramey Associates, where we've really focused on the areas that benefit the most, which would be underserved populations or older buildings where people have disproportionately high energy or water bills. So we're saving resources, but we're also having a social benefit by reducing utility costs. I think I'll just stop after each of these and say any comments, suggestions, reactions.
We have one
I see a
member
hand
of
up,
the public.
Cynthia.
Yes, Cynthia.
Cynthia, go ahead.
Yes, you're talking about buildings that contribute to that don't contribute to climate change and green energy. Frank Lloyd Wright built a house into a hill in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yes,
my sister has a split level home in Aurora Grande, a very large home. And her basement that's built into the hill is about 20 degrees cooler. It has only windows at the top of that floor. My husband recently put solar screens to stop about 90% of the sun's rays coming into our home. And our electrical bill, of course, we keep it about 75 degrees, but our electrical bill is about half of what our neighbors pay. So there's a lot of ways that you can save energy with how you build city buildings or buildings that are in a park, different ways, not as much glass and a lot of solar screens on the glass that you have. There are many different ways that you can save energy.
Yeah, all excellent points. And what's great is you mentioned a number of sort of fairly inexpensive, passive design strategies. So, the screen over west-facing glass would have a big benefit. Planting a tree on the west side of your home would have a benefit. So, the point here is things don't have to be super elaborate or exotic to have that benefit. And, so I think generally the way you go at this is you take the passive strategies, proper orientation, good windows, well-insulated walls, and then you look at adding on things like the photovoltaic and the battery to offset the energy use of what is hopefully an efficient building already.
So why doesn't the city do some of those construction strategies in their public parks?
The city is updating their zoning code as a follow-on implementation to the general plan, and those kind of policies can be incorporated in that. The general plan can also include policies about passive design related to energy conservation. Debbie, I see your hand up, and then Teresa.
Yeah, I just want to say I like the idea of new construction doing the battery backup. That seems to be one of our problems with solar right now, is we don't have enough battery backup, and I think that would be a great way to go, especially now that the Tesla walls are coming down in price. I think that's a great way to go. I wish we had gotten same with our solar screens. We did solar screens and we didn't see that much improvement over our baseline from the previous year, but every little bit helps. So I like that we're looking at storage capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. And
Thank
then,
you, Debbie.
Cynthia, just on this comment about, why doesn't the city do these measures? They may not have done them in the past, but a policy that isn't in our list, but could be, is that the city adopts, a green building standard for future city buildings or future major renovations of city buildings that would, ask that they achieve an energy star standard, just looking at energy or, some sort of green building rating. Or even just pursuing, the state's green building code has 2 optional tiers, Cal Green, there's a tier 1 and a tier 2. So they might just, commit to pursuing tier 2 in the state building code for any, civic buildings of any significant size. Okay, Teresa, next in line.
Yeah, I just was thinking that, how we have such a demand on electricity right now with the heat wave and with climate change going on, that we really need to be careful how we handle the all electric designs on buildings to make sure that we don't create more of a demand on that electric power. I think that's a concern that I see, but I'm sure it can be handled in different ways, like some people have already discussed, that we don't put a bigger burden on that grid.
Yeah. Excellent point. And I mean, this is understood that, as the homes become more electric and cars become more electric, that there need to be infrastructure upgrades around the electric grid. Okay. All right. I think we have Maribel.
Yes. Hi, thank you. So I wanted to ask a question. Maybe this is not the forum, but you can help me decide that. Are we considering putting like electrical, the electrical, I don't know what they're called, the charging stations,
yes,
in major public spaces or whatnot, or things like that. The other is, and you'll probably cover later, I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking about what the last speaker was saying regarding, not adding, to be careful on, the energy that we don't create more problems for it. But I think that's what she was saying. So I may misinterpret that. But my question is, do we have a way to mitigate, to prevent power outages? I don't know if that's included in here, but something to prevent power outages, because in the previous meeting we were talking about, possibly more population here, more need for electricity, more need for, there could be potential more vehicles and so on and so forth. I think you all get the picture.
Yeah, sure. So I think we're going to talk about the electric vehicle charging in a couple slides. It's just the one thing we're talking about tonight on transportation is, if you want people to have electric cars, they need the infrastructure so they can charge. So, and then on the power outages, this is often due to sort of giant regional things around the Western grid and power shortages. So there may not be so much that can be done to prevent the power outages, beyond having your house be energy efficient so it doesn't contribute to the problem. But then that resilience hub at the neighborhood level that I was talking about is a way to be prepared for the power outage so that people aren't put at risk. So that would be a place that would have batteries, would still be able to provide heating or cooling and light and refrigeration from medicines and cell phone charging, so that when the power goes out, people aren't, again, in a dangerous situation. Okay, let's move on, because we also, we do have this breakout session. So this is excellent input, but I also want to keep things moving. Okay, so on the resilient and fossil-free energy, this is kind of the energy that's coming to you either through the pipe gas company, but really a lot of this discussion is about the electricity. So the state requires that we get to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045. And so, a policy that could be adopted by the city are to provide 100% carbon-free or renewable energy to residents and businesses sooner than 2045. And, the way that this is often done is through some kind of local purchase by the city of electricity, or the city participating in what's called a community choice aggregator, or a CCA. And our understanding is there's some thinking and activity on this level that's currently going on. Basically, you wouldn't be getting your power from Edison, you would be getting your power from another source that can go buy renewable energy. Other policies are to explore the development of solar projects in the city, in appropriate places. So you would be generating your own energy, potentially connecting those in what's called a microgrid, where you can have multiple buildings that are generating energy and sharing energy. And then as we already touched on, encouraging the combination of solar plus battery storage for new developments or for major renovations. Just to keep things moving, let's say I won't deliberately ask, but if people have questions or comments, raise your hand and we'll pause and take the comments. So let's go to the next one here, which we already have. So as we mentioned, we're not talking about the whole breadth of transportation tonight because that's been another topic, but we're just discussing the sort of clean vehicle aspect. So, what's in place at the state, the, Hadley Clean Car Standards, which, sets GHG emissions thresholds for vehicles, largely that they're fuel efficient. There's a regional requirement, this SB 375, that is more of a sort of county-wide undertaking to look at reducing congestion, reducing vehicle miles traveled. And then, as Sammy mentioned, we have this executive order from Governor Newsom that sort of put a line in the sand that said, 100% of cars sold in the state of California are going to be zero emission vehicles by 2035. So it's 14 years from now. Basically, you could only buy an electric car or a car that's powered by hydrogen, in 14 years. And the policies that we've talked about are, promoting EV readiness. So this can be providing the chargers in new construction, providing the conduit and the circuitry to install the chargers at a future date in new construction. The city could have a policy to purchase ZE, zero emission vehicles, for anything in the fleet when it's feasible. Some exciting news about the Ford F-150 electric, because for years cities would say we can buy cars for the inspectors, but we can't buy a pickup truck. Well, now there's a pretty awesome electric pickup truck out there available in an electric model. And then if it isn't electric or zero emission, to just say that the city will always buy the most energy efficient or fuel efficient version of whatever is going on. If it's a big truck or lawn garden, city level commitments. On to the next.
Pat,
yes.
Pat, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to get to the part about the waste from the hazardous waste from batteries, from electric cars and electric whatever they're going to require. We got about a 250,000 metric tons of highly nuclear waste being stored, waiting for somebody to come up with an answer for that great idea back in the 70s. So I think that we should at least talk about what's going to happen to the waste, the batteries from these vehicles and whatever else.
Yeah, excellent point. And something I think about. So, the general approach is they end up in the cars first, and then when they get degraded to 80% or so, then they would end up as a storage system in the house where you don't need as much sort of precision on range. And then there's the open question of what happens next. And I don't feel like the recycling industry is keeping pace. The battery recycling industry is keeping pace with the battery production facilities. So question, Pat, is like, what can we do at the Palmdale level to address that issue? But it's a very important one, and I'm glad you raised it.
Well, and solar panels are also a hazardous waste after their useful life is over, and there's sure a lot of those around.
Yes, so I mean we're getting into this sort of philosophical terrain of like, by solving one problem, climate change, we can end up creating a whole series of other ones, and we do want to be conscious of these consequences, even if they're unintended. So
we're not going to solve climate change.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Okay, duly noted.
Yeah, Maribel has a question quickly. Maribel, I'm keeping an eye on time. Like, yes. We have still have a lot of the presentation to
No problem. Just really quick regarding the sustainable transportation planning. Just want to make a suggestion. I don't know if it's been, something that's been thought of, but maybe looking at the Northeast Transportation Authority. I believe it's a coalition, because they talk a lot about these different projects. And so I'm just hoping that we can align what's going on with the city with all of this, so that we don't mess one up, but make one better. And, I think you can make what I'm trying to say here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, and we've touched a fair amount on this issue of resource capture and, reduction landfill waste. And Sammy talked about SB 33 and organics diversion. So, policy options are, for the city to adopt a zero waste plan. This is something a number of other cities have done, and setting a target in the future to go beyond just compliance. It's well understood that just compliance with the organics provisions is difficult. We heard some of that from Ben, but underway. And some ideas about an education program to help people, do things at the, their sort of local level, their home level, on composting or reuse of materials. And then if your waste franchise agreement is coming up in the near future, it gives you the opportunity to look at all kinds of things. What's picked up in terms of recyclables or organics, or if there's a way to reset the rate structure. So if people have smaller bins and throw away less, that they would have a lower bill. So we're, incentivizing the kind of behavior that we'd like to see. Go to the next slide. Oh, unless Cynthia's hand.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yes, my husband's an engineer. Actually, he designs rocket engines for Blue Origin. And I met him because he was in the hydrogen department at Vandenberg Air Force Base originally. And what someone brought up, what do we do with the electrical batteries from the electrical vehicles? Well, there's a whole new answer to that in hydrogen fueled vehicles.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So, right, like the hydrogen gets combusted, there's a byproduct of water. And then the core issue is like, where do we get the hydrogen from? If there's surplus solar, you can use it to take water apart basically and get the hydrogen off of the oxygen. So thank you for bringing that up, because we can think it's all about electricity and batteries. Hydrogen is.
And Walker, this is Sammy. I was just going to add one other policy that we don't have on here because it doesn't, result in direct emissions reductions, but is another maybe possible solution to this waste question is, extended producer responsibility. So shifting the burden away from the consumer, you and I, and putting it back on the people who are creating that waste in the first place. And this again goes back to that sphere of that kind of levels of actions that cities can take. And although Palmdale itself can't put in a very, do that sort of policy, it can advocate at the state level to continue to have them explore a policy like that.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's keep going. Also, just so you know the structure, like we're kind of running through these, it's good to have this dialogue. After this, we have breakout groups to like continue discussing like what have we missed, what else could we add. So you'll get a second bite at the apple if this feels a little rushed. So we'll go through the next few topics in the policy frameworks. Okay. This one is on water. We understand a lot of your water is imported, so most of what's in here is using water efficiently and to the degree it's possible to get the water when it's falling out of the sky to go back into the ground and, and be a local source. So we've talked about MWLO for landscape. CalGreen has water fixture efficiency standards for toilets, showers, and sinks. And so some of the policies would be to see if there's any way to more efficiently distribute recycled water. So we're not using potable water, drinking water for things that could use recycled water, like landscaping or even toilet flushing. We've known cities that have gone through and established more stringent efficiency standards than what's in those state guidelines for indoor and outdoor water use. Way to sort of revisit the landscape plant use and encourage, even more use of low water plants. There's quite a bit in your area. Rainwater capture, and then I think as the drought progresses, things like gray water that can seem exotic or expensive start feeling less so, and there's an opportunity for cities to streamline the permitting process for gray water systems. So you can already do the laundry to the landscape without a permit, but as soon as you try and store it at all and use it for something else, it becomes quite complicated. So I think just like the streamlining has happened for solar PV, it could definitely be done for community resilience. I think maybe our last topic. So we have some new state requirements, SB 379, that requires that these issues of climate change be factored into emergency management planning and safety elements, which you see there with AB 2140. And then we just see these policies of sort of thoroughly looking at issues of vulnerability, exposure, sensitivity to these different hazards broadly, and with the focus on the climate-related ones, and the impact on both physical infrastructure and on people. We talked about working with Edison to minimize impacts of public safety power shutoffs, and we can talk about these community facilities, making them more resilient, so they're places to go when there are those disruptions, have recovery plans prior to any type of disaster, and then have a policy so that when you rebuild, we don't just rebuild back the way it was, but there's a policy to rebuild to current standards in a way that precludes or at least prepares for what is anticipated in the future. The next slide. And then lastly, just being aware of sort of past and present issues with the environment, whether it's past issues of environmental injustice or disproportionate exposure with SB 1000, but I think also just being aware of sort of the ecosystem that people are located into. So part of this is just to integrate environmental sustainability issues into how the city makes decisions, such as having an environmental or sustainable section in staff reports that just ask these questions, to acknowledge that there is an indigenous history, whether that's at the start of the meeting or how land planning is done or how open spaces are thought of being designed or events are structured so they're inclusive of that. Think about how sustainability criteria may find its way into budgeting, and then trying to raise just awareness of the uniqueness and fundamental beauty of the landscape up there, when you're building parks and doing nature centers, expanding trailheads, and really giving people increased opportunities to engage with the environment and appreciate it. We protect what we love, and if we can have a chance to engage with the environment, build a connection to it, then it's something we would make the effort to invest in protecting and enhancing. So, this is the recap of what we've talked about, and then we can just go to the poll. And I don't know, I don't know how to start it, so I'll need some help to make that happen.
Sure, if we're ready, Walker, I can get our next poll up.
Thank you.
All right, we've got our last poll for the evening launched. This asks one question, which says, what is your top climate and sustainability action priority? There's several options, including decarbonize new and existing buildings, encourage the transition to electric vehicles, divert food waste and organics from landfills, use recycled water, prepare for the impacts of climate change, including heat, drought, wildfire, and wind, celebrate and preserve Palmdale's special environmental characteristics and history, or supply 100% carbon-free electricity. We'll just wait another moment for folks to finish making their selections and then show the results. All right, thanks everyone. We're going to close the poll. And you should now see the results on your screen. Looks like the majority of folks, 45%, selected prepare for the impacts of climate change, including heat, drought, wildfire, and wind, followed by 35% who selected use recycled water. And then we have a three-way tie with 6% for celebrate and preserve Palmdale's special environmental characteristics and history, divert food waste and organics from landfills, and encourage the transition to electric vehicles. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you. And interesting that there wasn't a lot of interest in the building electrification or the 100% carbon-free electricity. It's interesting for me because those are sort of hot topics in the world that I operate within. And also to just see the concern about climate change. So thanks everyone for doing the poll. I think I'm done.
So let's do things a little bit differently. First, let's ask if there are any other questions from the GPAC members or from the community. Want to raise your hand, and for those who want to know, you go to the reactions button, and then that has the little tab to raise your hand. So we'll start with GPAC members, and then we'll move to the rest of the audience. Not seeing. Yes, Debbie.
Yeah, I think if we were given two choices on that last poll, I know he just said that he was kind of surprised about the electrification of buildings. I think that would probably be the second that everybody is interested in. I mean, we've got some real heat issues out here and wind issues, but also that's another super important thing, I think, is going to solar and wind power and green energy. I think a lot of us would agree that that is almost equally as important as preparing for the climate change events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Teresa?
Yeah, I know you mentioned the laundry to landscape, and the coal gray water thing is not very, it's new to me, and I'm wondering if there's any resources or things that you have to help with creating those systems or learning about how to create those systems in residential areas.
Well, let's see. I have some ideas sort of through the water districts, but maybe we should check with Ben again and see what the city may already have in place.
Yes, I'm not aware of a whole lot of resources for that particular topic. Since we aren't our own water agency, we're partners with them, but we don't prepare that type of material. It could be something we can follow up with our local water districts and see what they have in place to address those kind of questions.
Okay. And there may also be something in the building and safety. Again, the laundry to landscape, which is basically like the hose off your washing machine goes out into your yard. Like that typically can be done without any permit. So there's some standard examples, but we can follow up a little bit.
Debbie, did you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. I just forgot to lower my hand. I'll do that right now.
No worries.
Teresa, another couple of good resources for laundry to landscape are LA County. They have some good ideas out there available, and then Greywater Action has other really good ideas, and there's even systems that are already approved, so you can check some of those out as well.
Yes, great point. Greywater Action is really kind of the place to go to kind of understand all of this different systems. And then they do have sort of plans and directions on that laundry to landscape.
Doing a quick time check here, I think what we're going to do a little bit differently than what we had planned is instead of going to breakout rooms, we'll stay in this larger group. I think we're having a good discussion, and I think everyone will benefit from hearing what the others have to say. We have about 15 minutes for the discussion portion, and we have 4 questions for you all, and we can take it from the top. Are there other outcomes that or goals that we should consider for this policy framework? Is there anything we missed in your opinion?
Can we hold the state accountable for things? There's things that we have no control over. And I got a question though. I don't know if Walker knows if the state's putting together an effective forest management plan.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the status of that.
Because I'm curious to know what the emissions are from a wildfire and how there are a lot. We're being required to make up for that, you know, through parking our cars or whatever it is. And then you think about the amount of water that gets dumped on those wildfires. And, you know, there needs to be some accountability in Sacramento for a wildfire or forest management plan. They really need to do something, a realistic one like we used to have years ago.
Anything else at the state level? You know, I mean, you don't have control, but you can advocate.
Or just complain.
Yeah. Anything else to complain about? I'm giving you a hard time. The forest management plan, but you know, there was this question about plastic bag ban, and I did a little research just during our meeting, and you know, that's largely happened at the state level nationally. More of cities doing it and then states adopting the ban. Although it looks like some cities have decided they may want to do more than what the state has already put in place. A good thing about California, unlike other states, is it's generally possible to have a local requirement that exceeds the state. So the state will be seen as the minimum. Other states, you don't get to do that. You have to follow the state code. It's Dillon's rules. So there are issues where you feel like the state isn't doing enough, but Palmdale could do more, do something different. It is worth, exploring. Okay, I see that Cynthia has her hand.
Yes, I don't know if you're aware that most of the forest land in California is federal forest. It's under the U.S. forest. It's not state forest. And so it's up to the federal government to do that. And also Native Americans had a forest management plan, and they've some people now are realizing we need to do what they did because they managed the forests hundreds of years before very well. What they did was when we had the wet season, not the dry seasons, they would do controlled burns during those times. And then when we had the dry seasons in the summertime, hot, dry winds, they didn't have to go through and with manpower to, get rid of all the old branches and so forth, because they managed it with fire controlled burns.
Yeah. Yes, I think there's a lot that we can learn from the indigenous people and their relationship to the land. And so, this whatever 100 years of fire suppression is having a lot of negative impacts on us today, certainly. So, is there a way to bring this kind of home to Palmdale? Like, what's the, doesn't seem like there's much of a direct wildfire concern, not a mountain community, but there's certainly negative impacts from the smoke. Is there a policy opportunity to do more than like have a place to go when things are on fire and it's smoky? trying to tease this out a little bit, put it in your context. Debbie,
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the wildfires again. We actually do have mountain communities. Rancho Vista is actually on the
that's
hillside.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about
I
that.
think one of my big concerns was, I'm not getting political, I'm just going to give a factual statement. I was concerned when our governor claimed he did almost 10 times the amount of roads than what was actually done, knowingly. Disseminated incorrect information about that. And I think where we live, wildfires are a big issue. And also in central East Palmdale, the ones that are near the aqueduct, they're also in a wildfire area there as well. And I think just having some fire roads and stuff is important for us to have those, because the last fire that came down into Rancho Vista almost came down to Rancho Vista Boulevard. So it's a big issue for us here, for some of our areas. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay.
I'd like to encourage some of the other GPAC members to share their thoughts. You've all been very quiet.
Hey, Teresa.
Yeah, along the lines too, like Patrick was saying, with keeping people accountable, like at the residential level, like my household level, I try to do my best to recycle and, use less plastic. But, the grocery stores, the restaurants, holding them accountable. And somebody was also saying about the people who are producing this waste, right? Like I can't go to a restaurant and enjoy their food without getting it in plastic waste and plastic containers. And so I'd love to see policies where we're keeping our restaurants and our businesses maybe accountable for creating less waste or being more environmentally friendly.
It's a great idea that we don't have on our list, but a number of cities will have a green business certification program. Businesses can commit to reducing waste, reducing water use, a number of other things, being energy efficient, and get that kind of designation. There's a number of them in Southern California that have gone through that kind of program. So that's something that we can suggest.
Are there other policy ideas that we should consider? Maribel, you just mentioned one. Are there others? And again, I'd like to encourage GPAC members to share their thoughts. Or someone else from the community who hasn't spoken yet.
Looks like GPAC member Teresa has a hand up.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Yes, hi everybody. In talking with our electrical needs, I have huge concerns with going electrical vehicle, just because as we talked about the strain on the grid, the state of California already borrows more than 35% of our electrical energy from other states. We can't even produce our own energy here enough to handle the grid that we have now. And I drive an electric vehicle. I know the cost of it. We just installed solar in our home, like solar panels, just to help defray the cost of charging our car. So I just have huge concerns with that. I hope as we move forward, we start seeing a lot of problem solving, because as we said before, with moving forward with going greener, I feel that we are going to be opening the door to more environmental issues than we have now. And I think they'll be a lot more dire than what we're dealing with. Sorry, I'm losing my voice now. But that is a huge concern. I just don't know how our state's going to produce enough energy for us to handle all this. Huge concern.
Thank you. And again, this has been an interesting discussion tonight about some of these, consequences or unintended consequences, and acknowledging just the ripple effects of No, one action done well intended can lead to something else.
Go ahead, Pat.
As Leon Musk was leaving the state of California, he said that it's told Newsom that it can't go all electric by the time he wants to. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic. And then you look at all the industries that are going to go belly up. You have motorcycles, boating, all kinds of motorsports that are just going to disappear out of the state of California. So I think it's very detrimental to try and it's putting all your eggs in one basket to go all electric. That's my concern.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Pat. Teresa, sorry, I accidentally lowered your hand. Please go ahead.
I think that we all have the same goal in common, to save our planet. No doubt, because we have future generations to come. My issue is setting these stringent timelines of saying we have to do everything by this certain date or else. I think that we have to have balance, that we have to be careful and be steadfast in saving our environment, saving our planet, but in a reasonable, timely manner, and having, like Pat said, and I had that same thought in my mind, what are we going to do with all these car batteries? What are we going to do with all these other batteries in our homes? That waste that we don't know what we're doing with yet, but we're going to have all electric vehicles. So, you know, those are all things that are important, and that we need to be more flexible as far as let's do it all right now or nothing. I think that's a big concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, great comments. And, you know, I just thinking back on this story about the person who had met her husband at the hydrogen facility. I don't remember the company, but, you know, there may be an opportunity to do something that ties into your history and shows another pathway towards, you know, carbon-free transportation that really is more investing in the hydrogen infrastructure, which does get you away from all of the battery waste. So, you know, that could be a unique approach, because it, you know, clearly ties into things that have happened in aerospace. So just food for thought about what again makes sense, you know, in Palmdale more than it may have made sense in some other communities.
I see Lisa Kraft. Did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I just noticed that there's a lot of cities in California where they have like everywhere you go, there's like 3 trash cans, one for plastics, one for cans, and one for solid waste. And like here in Palmdale, like you go to like a restaurant and they give you all this plastic and you just have to throw it away and it all goes to the landfill. So I've just seen other cities, like for example, Santa Cruz, everywhere you go, you recycle in the trash. And also like in Santa Cruz, they don't have any drive-throughs in the restaurants. And that also cuts down on emissions. And also in San Luis Obispo, they don't have any drive-through restaurants. So, you know, I mean, I kind of think that the culture of Palmdale needs to be, people need to learn how to appreciate the environment more, and because we're just as beautiful as Santa Cruz and San Luis Obispo. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Lisa. Other policy ideas from the GPAC members or members from the community? Or if you have heard something that's already been stated that has specifically resonated with you. Debbie, and then Cynthia.
Sorry to be speaking up yet again. One of the that I would like to see is waste management increasing the amount of recyclables that they will take. Our community does not really meet the requirements of a lot of other communities. I'm thinking specifically in the Bay Area, where there's a whole lot more stuff that can be recycled. It was mentioned about plastic trash. Those are things that can be managed. Another thing I noticed in this town, it's almost impossible to recycle glass. Nobody takes it. So I think dealing with some of those issues, that if people are going to recycle, that they, in Palmdale, that they don't just take aluminum cans, for example, that they do glass and plastic, and that waste management work on taking more types of things. I know they do batteries and mattresses and all that kind of stuff, but when you get into the triangle, they really only go down to a number 3, which isn't very far down. So I know I've seen some comments on Nextdoor, so I know other people in my community have a similar concern. So that, in going forward, as we look into the future, I think increasing our capacity for recycling is super important. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Go ahead, Cynthia. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. I have a solution that's a very old solution about the cars that are have their car running in all these drive-through places. The old solution was that there used to be somebody on roller skates taking your order, and you were just parked and your car was turned off. And I don't know why places like Chick-fil-A that's constantly have running cars waiting in line, why they can't just have one of their people go out and take the order from a parked car. That's the way it used to be, and it was a lot more fun too.
Interesting idea. Thank you, Cynthia.
We should require that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because you just think, well, it's just the way it is. There's drive-through in restaurants, and it's how it works. Of course, it doesn't have to be the case. And I think Lisa also just raised this important point about the, culture of sustainability, culture of environmental stewardship. So, we've talked a lot about policies, programs, technical things, but we did sort of end with this, appreciation of the natural environment. But I think there's also just having again, sort of an ethos of environmental responsibility. And so I think part of the planning challenge is to say, well, where might that get started? What parts of the city, are a place where there's a catalyst or a beginning of creating that kind of awareness and culture, whether it's already there, if it's in some of the places, the opportunity areas where you may anticipate new development, where that kind of an approach could take hold.
Go ahead, Pat.
Yes, sir.
I guess in the real estate business, I get around, I see a lot of different things at different times of the days and during the week. One of them is on the weekend, I've come down to Aracebita and seen the line of cars waiting, or trucks waiting to get into the landfill. And what made me think of it was people sitting in line at fast food places where you got trucks lined up all the way out to the main street, waiting to get into that landfill. And I think that the city probably should try and negotiate with waste management some type of way to expedite getting more of their customers in and out of that landfill quickly. And it'll go a long ways when people say, I'm not going to sit in line for an hour, hour and a half to get into the landfill. I'll just go out in the desert and dump. And then when you get to the window at the landfill, it's sticker shock too. It's really expensive. So I think the city needs to kind of have a conversation with waste management. I know it's an expensive thing to run up there, but still, that's where the problem is.
Thank you, Pat. We have time for one or two more comments, and then I think we need to move on to the next steps. Was there anything else any of the GPAC members wanted to share about the topics you've discussed today that you haven't had a chance to? Now's your chance. Yes, go ahead, Teresa.
Been talking about waste management a lot, and you know, just driving around the community, seeing all the trash out in the desert, which is really sad to see. But wouldn't it be fun if we had different parts of Palmdale, different sections on a weekend at a time, to have residents come out and pick up trash in those areas, and then maybe get a free pass to go to an event or something like that, to make it fun, and to get our residents involved and participate more in you know, keeping our community looking nice. Because boy, the trash that I see out there, it's just horrific, even just, you know, driving by today. And actually there is more trash there than you visibly see. If you go walking out into those areas, there's double the trash there. You can't see it all just driving by because it's hidden under brush and other items. So that's just a comment.
Yeah, it's a great idea. You can build, it's a community idea for community service, which also serves the purpose of beautifying Palmdale. So thank you for that.
Hook up with Steve Hoffauer to find out when the next time he's going to do it. He's done it a couple times this year.
Who is that? Steve?
Mayor Hoffauer's been doing that. He's done that a couple times this year. Get the big dumpster delivered out there, and then get a bunch of people in the community to go out and pick up the trash. And load up the sofas and all the mattresses and all those things. He's out there working with them.
And we think this is, I know, I can tell someone wants to move on, but we think this is happening partly because the tipping fees are so high at the dump.
I believe that's part of it. They keep going up, and it's a pickup truck loads $75 to dump.
There's a very complex conversation around illegal dumping and everything that goes forward. I think Teresa brought up a great point of an additional incentive. We do have community cleanups almost every single weekend. I know a lot of them have stopped because of rattlesnake season. So, but they were out there literally every weekend, multiple community groups. But having some kind of additional incentive to make it fun, or even partnering. Like I said, we have an illegal dumping task force that we are, you know, tackling right now. So all these are great ideas to continue to incorporate into that, and we'll make sure that this conversation continues. So great feedback. And yeah, I think we might be nearing the end of our time tonight. So
yeah, I think we have time to go over to our next step. Teresa, did you have one more thing, or okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if they are going and cleaning, I guess I'm not aware of that. I think we need to advertise in a bigger way, because I read the emails that come with the Palmdale thing, but that advertisement to get everybody excited about let's clean up our area, that I think needs to be stepped up.
Thank you, Teresa. I think I'm doing a quick time check, and I want to respect everyone's time and end on time today. So let's go over to the next part of the presentation, which is a brief overview of how to give additional feedback besides the great feedback we have received today. Melissa, did you want to walk us through the tools we have on the website?
Yeah, thanks, Simran. I'm going to make this really brief. For those who don't know, our policy frameworks are on the project website. They were sent out to the GPAC in advance of this meeting and have a little bit more detail than what we've covered tonight. We'd like all members of the community to review and provide comments on that policy framework. It's currently on the project website, uploaded into a tool called Conveyo, where you can actually scroll through and provide comments directly in the document on the project website. The green bar you're seeing on the screen right here are some of the navigation tools that you'll see on the website. Starting on the left-hand side, you'll see the zoom in and zoom out feature, page up, page down. If you go to the next slide, this is what it looks like when you go to the palmdale2045.org website. If you click one more time. If you click anywhere on the document, you'll see this screen pop up where you can type in your name, your email address, and your comment. If you click one more time. That'll be submitted and it'll show for all other users who are looking at the document. The third bubble you're seeing is the opportunity to actually comment or thumbs up or thumbs down other folks' comments. So it's a really great interactive way for you to provide a comment and also see what other residents and your neighbors think of the tool as well.
Are there any questions about how to use this tool? And I'll send out a direct link for everyone, but just so you know, the homepage of the project website has a big blue button that says visit the new website page by clicking here for policy framework. If you click on that, there'll be some intro text, and if you scroll down, you'll see our 2 policy framework documents that are loaded. And as we continue with these meetings throughout the summer, all the documents will be loaded in the same spot. And if you think you'd rather just send an email with your comments, please do that to generalplan@cityofpalmdale.org.
Yeah, that's a great reminder that in addition to commenting directly in the website, you can download a PDF version of the document if you'd like to review it in another format.
Thank you, Melissa. And with that, I want to remind everyone of the next few meetings that are coming up over the summer. Our next 2 meetings are discussing the topics of land use, mobility, and housing. And we'll be focusing on land use and housing at the first meeting, which is on July 15th, and mobility as it relates to land use on the meeting on July 28th. And then in August, the 2 meetings focus on economic development and military readiness. That's on August 5th. And the last meeting is on August 11th, which covers parks, public facilities, health, and environmental justice, as well as equity. So if you haven't already, please mark your calendars, bring a friend, bring a family member to these meetings. Love to get more folks involved and get additional input from them. Overall, schedule-wise, as we are going through these policy framework meetings, we're also beginning work on preparation of the general plan document itself, which will be available for public review by the later part of this year, and then the adoption hearings as well as the EIR circulation will happen in early 2022. And with that, if there are any last thoughts, please raise your hand. And yes, go ahead, Councilmember Correa.
Hi, I just want to thank everybody that took the time to participate. I've been trying to do a lot of these meetings just to observe. My intent is not to participate, but just to listen to all the good ideas and interest from the different GPAC members and the community members. A lot of topics that were touched on, things that we're working on, but I don't want to elaborate on that because again, I just joined this meeting so that I can listen to what the discussion is. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for keeping up the good work and the interest in improving our city. Thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you all continue to participate. Thank you to city staff, and thank you to the consultant for doing all of this great work for us. Thank you. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carrillo. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great 4th of July holiday, and we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Thank you.